This is copyright-free music, which means I'm not going to get sued by ASCAP and BMI for playing it in a professional setting.
Tom, there's a place also called the Music Bakery, I think.
The Music Bakery, for this copyright-free stuff?
Yeah, it's CDs.
Yeah, you can get CDs and you can use them on your videos and audios and all kinds of things. This one is designed for meetings specifically, and it has like opening music and closing music, and I can't tell the difference between any of it, but that's what they say. All right.
What is it called?
It's called just copyright-free music. It's 3 cassette tapes. I don't know where the package is, but let me see.
Okay.
Powerful presentation music is what it is. Genius technique, time cutter. They'll come up to you right before the meeting. Oh, I'm sorry, your time's been cut. And then you run to the bathroom with my buddy Tim and then say, oh, this is going to be the worst one yet. Okay? Oh, what am I going to do? All right, here's a genius time cutter. First of all, you shouldn't be in that situation that you're not ready to know what material could be cut, because it gets cut frequently, your time, if you do this a lot. The second thing is this is the genius thing I learned from the president of the National Speakers Association, Terry Paulson. And that is you have a quotation or a cartoon or some other piece of high-impact, one-shot material that replaces a story. The story, one of your stories could be 3, 4, 5 minutes. A quotation that makes the same point could be substituted and knock out 3, 4, 5 minutes right there without you fumbling around and getting all out of whack, okay? So if you have several stories throughout your presentation, make sure you have backup quotes, cartoons, or things to substitute in case your time gets cut. If your time's extended, you could just go ahead and do the story and the cartoon. You know? Yes, Cynthia.
How do you handle it when your time is cut? Do they ask you to cut your pay too, or how does
Okay, the question is do they ask you to cut your pay if your time is cut? No, they normally don't. They usually have to bite the bullet and pay your full fee, because you've already done the pre-program work. You've done the bulk of the work before you get there. Your time is shot for that day anyway, just because they cut 15 minutes off. No, you wouldn't expect a fee reduction for something like that. If somebody asked you, I would go like, you want me to cut my fee? You were such a joker, you. Yeah, that's right. She went, yeah, like this. Yeah, Alan.
Let's say you have to give an hour, you were contracted for an hour presentation.
Contracted for an hour.
And it turns out because of scheduling, now they ask you if you can do it in 20 minutes or 30 minutes.
Great.
And we're not talking about cutting out a 5-minute.
No, but when are they asking you this?
Let's say about 15 minutes before you're ready.
Okay, well, what you do to them then is you turn it back on them. Absolutely, because remember, no matter how many thousands of bucks you get for this, you are an employee and you're hired to take care of them. This is not about you, this is about them. So, when they say that, what I'll say to them, okay, in our pre-program, we said how important this module was and how important this module was and how you really wanted them to get this module. Which one would you like to cut? I put it on their shoulders and let them make the decision. And we cut out a whole section then, if it's a massive cut in time. Yeah. All right, we're back again. Thank you. We're back again here. And we're so happy you got a little snack there to keep us going for the rest of the day. This section is going to talk about sources of material for you and how to organize that material so that you can customize your talks, but you don't have to spend your whole life doing it. okay? So the first one for our scorekeeper is what?
Sources.
Sources of material. Sources of material. I find material all kinds of places. One, if you're a beginning speaker, it's not the best place, but it's a place to see what kind of material is out there, are speaker resource books. You can go into any major bookstore, find books. There's one that's really great. It's, I forget the name of it, but it gives you the points that can be made with different stories. It's all by subject, so if you want to talk about enthusiasm, then there's a whole bunch of stories and quotes and humor about enthusiasm. And there's hundreds of categories. So you can go to your library and search out a book like that and use it as a basis. Usually quotes, you can use quotes all the time without too much trouble, but I'd be a little bit skeptical of using stories that you find in those books because everybody is looking at these stories. Your best stories come from your own personal experience, which we'll talk about a little later. So resource books are one way. Periodicals, as I mentioned in an earlier segment, are a great thing because there's always something going on that you can relate to the points that you want to make, and that material makes you look like you're very current because you got it out of the newspaper, USA Today, Wall Street Journal, things of that nature. So newspapers are good, other periodicals, magazines. You can get even trade journals are a good thing too if you're going to a specific industry. So believe me, every industry has its own trade journal. I mean, you can get hog farmer news, you can get any specific industry. I'll bet there's a toxicology. All right, Bobby?
Well, there's about 15.
15 different on toxicology. I did the talk for Air Force pharmacists. Believe it or not, they have their own trade journal. I found it on the internet. So I pulled things out of that. Believe me, I can't even tell you some of the things pharmacists talk about. But I was right in there with it because I had the trade journal. One time, I was asked at the last minute to do the Rapid Excavation and Tunneling Conference. These people dig holes in the ground. That's all they do. What's that? I didn't hear. Yell loud, remember, project. So I was, last minute, I had to fill in for a congressperson that didn't show up. I dug in, found out all kinds of stuff about tunneling, and I found one piece of information. Does anybody hear of the Yucca Mountain Project? Does anybody hear of that? Oh, you heard of it, sure you have. They've been digging a hole for how many years now?
Lots of years.
30? Maybe 30 years. It's to put waste, nuclear waste, right? The guy that's the head of the project is in the audience. I'm there at the last minute, and they know that I'm there filling in so that I can't be expected to know too much. So I started playing games with their program. I said, you know, folks, I was asked to come in here and do this, and this is called the Rapid Excavation and Tunneling Conference, right? And but from what I understand, this is not too rapid. So I walked right out to this guy that's digging the Yucca Mountain Project. And I said, you know, I understand you've been digging this 30, 40 years. Is that right? Oh, yeah, we've been really working on that project. And I said, well, I think they should change the name to the Yucca Dabba-Doo Project because Fred Flintstone could dig it faster than you. And the whole place went crazy. They knew he's a fun guy and he's teasing about the same thing. So you look for these things that are specific and you find them in their newsletters and their trade journals. So the minute I get to a conference, I'm grabbing well, if it's the last minute, I'll grab everything I can. But ahead of time, I'll ask them to send me your latest trade journals. And even if there's humor in them, they don't remember it. And you can pull from back issues and find humor and things that they're talking about and work it into your talk. So trade journals are a good source. Yes, Rudine.
For granted then in that last minute situation, you did not have a chance to interview people beforehand?
I still did. Yeah, there's always telephones, there's cell phones. Yeah, I still was able to talk to a few. That's how I found out that he's such a fun guy. And that they all knew each other. They've been all in business for 20 years in these things. Yeah, 40, 30 years, yeah. Gee, that hole's coming great, you know? They sit around the coffee shop talking about it, you know? So, yeah, whenever I can, I'll still call. And that's how I found out he was fun, all right? So, sources, you got anywhere you can find it, radio. television. I'm walking through the mall. I'm seeing things happening. I didn't bring it with me today. I'm in 7-Eleven, and I'm going to be talking to a bunch of early childhood trainers. And I don't have kids, but I see this battery-operated dum-dum sucker. Yeah, this is unbelievable to me. It's a AA battery, and you put your dum-dum in it, and it makes it go around so you don't have to lick it. It just hold it on your tongue. And I'm thinking, it's no wonder, you know, these kids are how they are today, you know? Battery-operated liquor, you know, you don't have to lick the thing anymore, you know? So you just keep your eyes open, you know? You'll see information that you can use and make points out of. And that's a simple thing. Gee, we're having trouble with our kids. I wonder why. Well, I saw this in 7-Eleven and then recap using the formula. Well, it's no wonder if we're doing, you know, giving these kids this stuff and putting them in front of the computer and television all day. All right, so you use it. It's funny, and it makes a point.
How do you know it was for kids?
I know. He said, "How do I know it's for kids?" Right? I don't really. I think it was the Barney thing on it. All right. So what's next?
Other speakers?
Other speakers. As I said, you can attribute. If you hear something good from a speaker, you can talk to them about it and say that you'd like to mention them in other speeches and use a little piece of this. Most of them will say, "Great," because one of the values of being, and we're in a speakers association, is we help each other. And I'll give you an example of this. I was doing a job in Lake Tahoe, and a friend of mine, Roger Herman, was the opening speaker. I'm the closing speaker, several days apart. We never even saw each other. So I called Roger. "Hey, what are you talking about, Roger?" I found out. He says, "What are you talking about, Tom?" I told him. So when he opened, he says, "You know, at the end of this, Tom Antion's going to be here, and maybe this will apply in XYZ. And then when I got there, he's long gone. I say, "Well, Roger Herman was here, and he told you to do this. Now, does this apply?" You know, I don't forget how I tied it together, but it's really a polished way for us to help each other. And it makes for a real nice convention because it looks so coordinated, and you're making the meeting planner look good that the crowd thinks the meeting planner had all this, put all this together, but they didn't. You did as a professional, all right? So other speakers are a good source. And like this Tim May, he told me about that. I mentioned his name. He's probably mentioning my name about something. So, you know, somebody's probably talking about Sock Buddy somewhere, as far as I know. So it's a way to help and get material. And then another good thing to do is to get together with some other speakers and then brainstorm on material and stories and practice stories together and things like that. And it's a great way to improve them in a safe environment where you're not out there getting paid and on the line to do it well, because the speakers are a trained eye and they'll give you tips that you couldn't get anywhere else. Right? What's that? Yes?
What about a gag? If you see someone else's gag, do you have to attribute that to someone? Or
Well, for instance, this one that the throwing the papers is no big deal. I mean, I don't care because I probably read it in a book somewhere. I may have read that in a clown book, all right? As a matter of fact, I do this act that's an old vaudeville thing where people go crazy over it. I wish I had time to show it to you on video. I have it here, where I tell about the mind-body connection. We talk about that a lot and how that's valuable. And so I'm talking about, I'm going to cut this guy in half on stage with these scarves. And I go through this whole routine setting it up, and I pull the scarves and underwear pops out. And people go crazy. It's laugh, it's funny, and it's one of their people that's up on stage with me. It's an old vaudeville. It has to be 30, 40, older than Yucca Mountain, as far as I know. You know, so. You know, so it's no problem to use that kind of stuff that's public domain. Yeah. Okay, what's next? Organization, which I'm obviously not good at. I lost a big piece of paper I was looking to read to you. But the organization, there's a couple ways. One is what we call hard copy. That means your cartoons and things that you have and information is printed in hard copy in your file cabinet. The good thing about this is that it forces you to look through, like if you have all kinds of humor and cartoons, to find what you want, you got to look through all the other stuff you have that may have been in there for a couple years and you forgot about. That's the good part about it. The bad part is it's slow. So I do hard copy and computer generated. So all my stuff is on computer also, so that I can put it on a disc or CD and take it with me on the road and have it in case I get a job while I'm on the road and have to go from there to the next one without going home and regrouping. So both are very valuable to you. So computer generated and hard copy. Now, cross-referencing is very important. See, if you identify a story, we'll talk about this briefly, you want to find how many points that story will make. Sometimes a story can make 3 or 4 different points, and what you do is slant the story so that it fits the intended point you're making. So you want to have a story, one story might be categorized under enthusiasm, going the extra mile, or 110%, or customer service, or whatever it happens to be. And then when you're creating a speech and you need something on enthusiasm, you go to that file, that story might show up, and then you slant it towards enthusiasm. Okay? Now I'll give you an example of an enthusiasm story, although I set it up for you that it's coming already. But the enthusiasm, the value of enthusiasm is, I was doing a presentation for a government agency one time. Early in the morning, I was there to critique their, believe it or not, government agencies have a sales force in some of them. This was Metro. And one of the people involved in Metro, I think he's long gone now, was an attorney that was going to talk about legislative issues affecting the transit industry. Really killer, boring topic. And I'm watching all these other presenters, and they're fairly, they're making the common mistakes. But I'm watching this guy before he gets up there, and I'm thinking, I'm going to have to tear this guy up. This guy, he had pants that were too short, like way too short, okay, like way up here. He had his tie, he had a single-breasted coat. His tie was out over the button, all right? He had big flakes of dandruff all over the place. The sleeves were too short. The guy was just a goober of a guy, okay? All right? What'd you say? It looks like Alan? Did you say that? No, his coat's unbuttoned. So I'm thinking I'm going to have to tear this guy up. So this guy comes on stage. He didn't come on stage. He flew on stage. He came out there, 7 o'clock in the morning. These people were like still bleary-eyed. And he was almost like Groucho Marx. He was going around. He was making points here. The electric screen accidentally went up in the middle of his thing. He made a boom, pre-planned ad lib. Perfect. These people were applauding this guy at 7 o'clock in the morning at a meeting you wouldn't even expect applause at all. He got the highest marks of anybody in that day because he got through to those people, took the most boring topic and got through to them and woke them up. So anybody can do this. His enthusiasm is what did it. He made every technical error you could make except for the good ad lib, but he got through to them. That's the whole bottom line. I'm not up here just so I can teach you how to be a ballerina, all right? Teaching to get through to people. That's the whole reason we're here, all right? So enthusiasm is good. What's next?
How to practice?
How to practice. Practice alone to start with. We talked in an earlier segment about bits, chunks, and series and how you want to practice 30 to 50 times in your throwaway time, which means time when you're doing your hair, when you're shaving, when you're driving to work. And when you practice that many times, it turns conversational. So practice that way. Forget this mirror stuff. Forget the mirror, okay? Don't think about the mirror, okay? Get yourself a video camera. The mirror, the only good time on mirrors is to do gestures, and I'll tell you that in a minute. The mirror forces you to concentrate on yourself instead of concentrating. I would put, like Dan back there puts dolls, or has dolls in his presentation. I would put some dolls around or get some friends and practice eye contact so that you're connecting with people. If you've got a mirror, you're just looking at yourself. You can look at yourself later on a video camera. The only good time to use a mirror is when you want to practice or see if you have any gestures that are a problem. And most of the time, an emphasis on gestures is just simply not worth your time. There's a lot better things you could work on. But if you're worried about it, get yourself a dumbbell or a heavy book and get in front of a heavier book than this, big book, and both hands, get in front of a mirror and do your talk. When your hands move, that's a real gesture, okay? Simple as that. Do it in front of the mirror because a lot of people are like all over the place. So this not only will keep them from, the Italian family kind of speeches, you know, and you know, it's just a lot of gestures that are sometimes distracting on stage. So get a heavy book and do your speech in front of a mirror. But for general practice, video camera, not mirror. Yes?
Toastmasters is a good place to practice.
Toastmasters is excellent. Somebody asked me about that today. Toastmasters is excellent if you want a very supportive environment, if you want to be forced to be, practice and do your duty and practice. So someone asked me what the difference Toastmasters and the National Speakers Association is. Well, there's a big difference. One is the people at NSA are doing it at a professional level, so there's much more emphasis on the business end of it. Real high-end techniques because the bar is raised when you're getting thousands of bucks rather than, you won't get applause if you just don't collapse on stage, which is sometimes Toastmasters, they're so supportive. And I saw the president of a club one time, he could barely talk, but he got big applause, and that's what it is. It's a supportive environment, which is good, and many people need that. But if you want to take it to the professional level, you have to NSA is a great training ground for that.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah, what I'm saying is, though, if you're trying to perfect a presentation or certain things, a lot of times you can't give that presentation to practice in front of an NSA.
Right, that's right.
Your local Toastmasters club that meets once every other week or whatever, get on their schedule and you can get at least part of your talk and get effective feedback right then and there and practice in front of a live audience.
Right. He's saying that you can use that to practice in front of a live audience. Now, the other side of that coin is, I suggested in an earlier segment, is that I do suggest that you get together with other professional speakers and form your own small groups to do the same type of thing on your own rather than a controlled environment. When you get together and practice together, you get a lot of good feedback. So both of them are good. So anything you can do to practice and get feedback is great. Yes, yeah, Bill.
One of the things you're suggesting is to practice by yourself with the video camera. I have a real problem because a lot of my excitement comes from the audience, their response, especially for you using humor where you really are playing.
You would say that I'd be in the same category then, right?
How did you have this problem at first, and how did you overcome it so that you were able to start effectively delivering without an audience in front of you?
Well, the bits are what that I practice. That you weren't here for that full discussion on that, but I practice bits of material, and then the next step to that is you don't just take those bits, and especially if they're humorous bits, and pop them in front of a live audience for a lot of money. You start doing portions of them in front of your friends, but you don't tell them. This is where it says on the handout, use your friends carefully. So you don't say, listen, I want to try this piece of material out for you, and then they start feeling obligated to like it or not. You want to get their real reaction. So I'll come up and say, hey, I heard this story, or this happened to me, and I'll see what their real reaction is. I won't tell them I'm testing it on them. Then if I'm getting good reactions, then I know I can take that into the marketplace. So I start out doing the bits with things that I think will be funny, practice them so that I don't mess up with my mouth to ruin the humor, and then take them to the marketplace in a two-step process. Friends in small groups, and then live. And it's okay to test live, but you only take a small percentage of your program. So I could test something brand new here after being here with you a whole day and mess up a little bit and not be in too bad a shape, okay? But you don't want to take a 40-minute major keynote and do too much testing. Okay, all right. What's next?
Get coaching.
Get coaching. There's no way that you can substitute for competent coaching. And one thing you have to be careful of is there's plenty of people out there that read this stuff in a book and think that they can be a presentation skills coach, all right? So you have to be very careful. Make sure they can really do it in public before they teach it to you. And that doesn't mean that people that are excellent up here can teach it, right, Nancy? Yeah. So you got to find somebody that's both able to perform and do it and able to teach it. Now, you might give an analogy of like a football coach. Many of them weren't the greatest, and they were great practitioners and tactical people, and that's good to have some of them on your team too, that maybe they never went the route to being the 200 speech a year keynote speaker, but they've studied it so carefully and had some successes training other people that they're competent. So check them out carefully. But get some coaching, get some objective feedback. One of the best ways, I coach people around the country that I never even met, because I get their videotapes. And that's good, and I like it to be shot before I meet them too, because I don't want them shooting one afterwards. I mean, I can do it that way, but I don't want them shooting one thinking that I'm gonna watch it. That changes what they really do. So I try to get a tape that they've already shot and look at that, all right? All right, what's next?
Storytelling.
Okay, now we're into the storytelling part. What page is that on?
183.
Please turn to page 183. Oh, while you're doing that, here's another sign that I like. This is in front of a bankrupt store. It says, "We undersold everybody." And on the door of a small restaurant, it says, "Out to lunch." Okay, 183, storytelling. And we went over enthusiasm on 184. Now, the first thing you do, and we'll talk about on 184, identifying a story. Once you identify a story, you figure out how many points you could make with that story. So, oh, here we go again. The dentists move in next to us. For those of you on the tape, there's a drilling sound coming from our left here. You want to make sure, is it usable in a corporate setting? Is it clean? Is it something that you wouldn't be ashamed of saying in a corporate setting? And that's very politically correct nowadays. You want to figure out how many points you could make with the story so that the story can do you well. Because if you get a story and you put months in, it can only make 1 point out of it, then your time may have been better spent looking for another story that could be used in many different settings. So find out what you can do, categorize it, and then figure out how you include this story. And to start a story, we said, you want to just get into it. You don't want to say, "It reminds me of the time," because that's trite and people know a story's coming. You just get right into it. So on the way over here, although even that one is a little trite, because people say, you know, on the way over here today, so-and-so happened. So, but you can say, at the grocery store the other day. I mean, I go to grocery shopping myself. They all know me there. A guy was there. He had this, I don't know, 2, 3-year-old, 4-year-old kid that was just screaming bloody murder. I mean, just terrorizing this grocery store. And this guy's pushing his cart. He's saying, "Be calm, Joey. No problem, Joey. It's, you know, don't scream, Joey." And I went up to him. I said, "You know, I'm not a parent, but I can't imagine how calm you're being with your little boy, Joey." He said, "I'm Joey." So it was basically a switcheroo I did on you. Sucked you down one path and boom, hit you the other way. All right, so it's simple storytelling, and it doesn't have to be that probably took less than a minute total. So storytelling can be very, very effective, but you've got to know how to get into it and get out of it. So usually you can plug the stories into the formula we talked about well earlier about point, story, and point. And then just get into it. Make your point, get into the story without setting it up like, "I want to tell you this story." Just get into it, finish it, and restate the point, okay? So you just add it to your formula, all right, storytelling. All right, so I think we had, what's next? The 3 lengths, yeah. I think I mentioned this earlier about having different lengths of your story in case your time is expanded or cut, or if you, as we're going to talk about in the marketing section, if you are on the media, you want to have a real crisp, short soundbite version of your story so that you can get the point across and give them a flavor for it, but they won't give you the time. You can't be on there all day telling a long story. Your whole segment will be over before you're done with it. So I have 3 different versions. Next.
Emotional language.
Yeah, what's the page on that? This is 129. Please turn, and I'm going to read this to you. Your word choice is so critical in not only humor, but in emotional stories. And the reason I talk about emotions is because people move to action on emotions, not on logic. All right? I'm going to give you an example of this right now. I'm going to read you a simple set of facts and ask you if, in fact, that would move you to action. And then I'm going to give you the facts and add emotional language and let you tell me about the difference that you noted. You could just listen along with this. You don't need to read. The facts are, there have been 11 accidents in the past year at the sharp curve, which is 2 miles north of Cherokee Lake on Route 857. Installation of guardrails, warning signs, and a flashing light will cost approximately $34,000. Even though we have not balanced the budget this year, I feel that we should appropriate money for this project. Thank you. That might be an appeal you might hear at a city council meeting, something like that. Okay, now, let me give you the same story with emotional language inserted. On July 18th of this year, John Cochran was found dead. The radio of his car was still playing when the paramedics got to his overturned vehicle. John's neck was broken. It was snapped when his car flipped over an embankment. No one here knows John Cochran because he did not live here, but he died in our neighborhood. Most of you do know the hairpin turn on Route 857 that has been the scene of 11 accidents this year alone and has injured many friends as well as strangers. We need money to put up guardrails, a sign, and a flashing light. I know money is tight, but I hope you see fit to find the funds to remedy this situation before the unknown John Cochran becomes one of your loved ones. All right? Goose pimples every time I read that. All right? Now the next page, write the check. That's right. The next page is what I did. Explains exactly what I did to the second version, which is add emotional language that has emotional appeal and grabs your heartstrings. And some of them were like, the radio of his car was still playing. I'm painting a picture in your mind of this horrendous scene. Just happened. Car is flipped over. The radio's playing. The guy inside's neck was broken. It was snapped. Okay? Emotional appeal. Turned it back into he died in our neighborhood. Okay, make you feel guilty that you would allow this to happen to a visitor to your neighborhood. So this is an example of how anytime you create a piece of material, if it's an emotional appeal or if you want to move people to action, you put the appropriate words in that will grab their emotions, not their logical side. Now, you have to have a balance because there are many people that are very logical and the second appeal would mean nothing to. However, they're less likely to be in your audiences. But you do have to appeal to them. You have to say, okay, we know how much money this is going to take and we think it's worth it so that this doesn't happen in our neighborhood. So you have to do both appeal, but if you leave out the emotional part, you are cutting out the movement, the getting people to move to action. That's emotional language. What's next, scorekeeper?
Get it right.
Get right into it.
Oh, okay.
Get right into it, right, is one thing. Get right into it.
All right.
Is that it? And we got, what's next? It says do's and don'ts, right? Okay, so let's go around the room a little bit, and there's a do's and don'ts section. Just read out loud, help me out here, just the first, what page is that on, by the way? Back in the storytelling section. 180, what?
183 to 190.
183. Oh, see how organized I am? I told you. 185, okay. That's 195. Okay, 185, that's right. We have do's there. So, Carolyn, did you find that yet?
Yes.
All right, give me the first do. Oops.
Use stories to illustrate points and state the point in addition to telling the story.
Okay, yeah, just the first sentence of them is great. Yeah, exactly what we said. Put the stories in the formula. Alan, next one, please.
Select stories to match the intelligence, experience, occupation, and age of the audience, as well as the nature of the occasion.
Right, you want to tell stories that they can relate to. As we stated earlier, you wouldn't tell a mutual fund story to people that are having trouble making their car payment. So make your story match their level. How about you, Alan?
Space stories at intervals to provide a change of pace and to re-emphasize your message.
Okay, we keep coming back to our graph that's been with us all day. Space them out as one of your attention-gaining devices throughout your presentation. That's all we're saying there. Okay, Margaret?
Oh, me. Tell about your troubles, stupidity or ignorance.
Right, people love that, as long as it doesn't go to your source of what? Credibility. So people love it when you tell a story on how you did the dumb thing, or if you were successful, it was dumb luck, and they love to hear those kinds of things. Bob?
Eliminate insequential detail. Use the fewest number of words that convey the message in an interesting fashion.
Right. Eliminate detail that doesn't really add to your story unless you're doing the real long version of the story. You can add exaggeration and a lot of extra detail. But back in the humor section, we talked about the least amount of words to get the point across. Okay, so there's other ones there. Let's switch to the don'ts real quick, which are on page 187. You had a whole other page and a half of do's, which I encourage you to look at a little later. Let's look at some of the don'ts. How about right here, Victoria?
Don't say the words funny, reminds me of, or story.
Right, because these set up resistance in people and telegraph the fact that a story is coming. So you don't want to do that, especially tell them, I got a funny story for you. So they're saying, okay, well, how funny is it, buddy? All right? So you want them to be so deep into it before they know it's a story that they're surprised with the ending and they laugh much easier. It knocks down the resistance. Okay, Rita?
Don't say, I heard a good one the other day, for the same reason you don't say, it reminds me of.
Right, it's the same reason. You're telegraphing what's coming. Give me that next one.
Never say, I don't know if I should tell you this one.
Right, that means if you're worried about it, believe me, you shouldn't tell it. If you have doubts in your mind, don't tell it. It's what they say, if in doubt, leave it out. Gwen?
Yeah, a question in regards to a lot of stand-up comedians that will come out with something that's totally outlandish and say it's true. And it just totally blows any of the credibility that I had in them when they're lying to you and want you to believe it.
Okay, well, in stand-up comedy, you can get away with murder. See, just as many people like that as don't. So in stand-up comedy, you can get away with anything. You don't have to have transitions. You can just, anything that you can get a laugh is the reason they're there. It's not the same as why we're here, is to reinforce our points and to make us more memorable and to lighten up the load on the audience. So the same people that you hate, somebody else loves. So it's just don't listen to those ones. And while we're at it, I just mentioned the word transition. I think I missed this in a previous section. I think that's on page 68, so you don't need to turn to it. But here's my thoughts on transitions. Where is the excitement if you go to the amusement park? This is a question I'll answer for you. It's not at the little kiddie ride where a 1 centimeter wave would knock your little bundle of joy out of the boat, right? That's not where the excitement is. The excitement is at the roller coaster, where the transitions are sharp. Even though you can see them coming, you know they're coming and you can't stop them. Boom, they hit you in the head. Now, if you want to hear people's heads hitting the desk from boredom, you do nice, simple transitions. Well, we were talking about bananas, so I'm going to go over here. No, I want people thinking, what's he going to do next? I want to drive people, some of the people crazy. Some of the people that are really logical and have to do everything right, I'm still doing them a service. And here's why. Because if they think they know what's coming, they will zone out and not listen to what really happened. So I want the people thinking, well, what is he going to do next? And that means that they're at least going to have to listen to find out. That's what I think about transitions. What a soapbox I was just on. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. We've had a great day together.
This is it?
Well, this is it except for the speak for money part. This is it on the presentation skills portion. Oh, you have a question? Okay.
Listen, Tom, you are making this look so easy, but I'm also kind of overwhelmed at how much work you must put in behind the scenes.
It's quite a bit. You can see she said she's overwhelmed at the work that I'm putting in. I don't know how that overwhelmed you, but, well, the thing is if you want to be I'm not sure why you're here, Margaret. I think that you want to be a professional speaker. And I encourage you to do it the easiest way you can. But I also know that the easy way is not the way that I got there, and that if you do and put in this work, it is inevitable that you will succeed. If you look for an easy way, then you could get lucky. If you're a celebrity, you make twice as much as me, and you couldn't hold a candle to me on stage. But that's just the ways of the world. I can't do anything about that. But I know I can be the best speaker I can be by using the techniques that I have. And these aren't all, I didn't make all these up. I kept my eyes open for 7 years now, watching the best of the best and compiled them for you. I can't do all the techniques in here because they're not all my style. This was designed so that there's a great spectrum of styles, and you pick what's good for you and practice the heck out of it and get feedback. So, yes, there's a lot of work, but it can be worth a lot of money to you. And I had a lady come up to me. I can't remember her name right now. It's right here, as a matter of fact. These kind of things, you can't put any money on it. You cannot put money on this. This is a lady, Nancy. Nancy was here when I recorded this years ago. I don't know what year it was, 1994. Was sitting over here. Didn't crack a smile all day. Now, here's another technique while we're on the subject, is you don't dwell on a person like that, because everybody else will be looking at that person and their energy level will come down. That's another reason you deliver a punchline to somebody that's going to laugh, because then everybody looks at them and are encouraged to laugh, all right? But I knew this lady was there. You cannot miss somebody like that in the course of a day. This is what she said to me. This almost brings a tear to my eye to think of this, of the power that you have up here. This is, well, I mean, I guess it's public. Her name's on here. Sue Cummings, Director of Marketing, National Energy Management Institute. I don't even want to read it. You read it. Will you read it for me, Carol?
Yes, I'll read it.
I just,
That's it. Tom opened up a whole new world for me. I feel more confident to include humor in every arena of my personal and professional life.
You can't buy that kind of feeling. And most of the testimonials I get, I hammer and write for people and make them sign it, okay? This lady came up to me after this presentation and said this, in tears herself. It's worth it to me to put the practice in so that I can get that kind of feeling out of me. Okay. Now, sharp transition, see? I want to tell you how and why I got so excited about this in the first place. Before we leave, or before we transition to the business end of this today, I want to take you back with me. Come back with me to 1973. Billy Joel was on the radio. Hit song was what? Remember it?
Piano Man.
Piano Man. Piano Man was on the radio. Hey, we got, hey, these guys, he knows. Billy Joel fan. The Exorcist was the big movie of the year. Part of it shot right down here in Georgetown, right? Richard Nixon was president. He didn't. He didn't have a movie back then, but he did have tapes. Yeah, and edited tapes. Yeah. I had just graduated college. High school. Went to college on a football scholarship. West Virginia University, Mountaineers. There you go. Went to class. Actually got good grades, and through that got some business opportunities. I ended up. I noticed that there was a waiting list for apartments at West Virginia University, in which I had been on, and I had to live in the dorm because I was a scholarship athlete. But your senior year, you could move out, and I started looking for them, and I found that, geez, you're on a waiting list a mile long for these apartments. So I thought this might be a good business opportunity. So I ended up buying a 3-unit apartment building and remodeled it, bought another one, bought another one, bought another one. By the time I graduated, I had 5 apartment buildings and I owned a hotel. Pretty good. I'm an entrepreneurial spirit. My parents instilled that in me. So I got out and I love flying. So I decided to become a pilot because my day was like going to the post office, picking up the rent checks, deposit them, and that was it. That was all I did. Made a repair now and then. So I went and got my pilot's license, went on to become a commercial pilot, charter pilot, which is kind of like a high-class chauffeur, basically. So I got bored with that. My mother says to me, why don't you buy a restaurant? That ought to be fun. Oh, yeah. So I bought a restaurant, got bored with that, so I built a nightclub onto it, turned it into the 2nd biggest nightclub in the state of West Virginia. I was on my way to being a millionaire before I turned 30. Until 1986. Anybody know what happened in 1986 that might affect a really big nightclub in a college town?
Changed drinking.
The drinking age went from 18 to 21. I lost $400,000 in one shot. I lost all my holdings. I lost everything. And so, all right, my dad put a drive in me to overcome anything. I'm unstoppable. I decided I better get in shape. I go down to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, playing racquetball with my best friend, tore my Achilles tendon, clear in 2, much worse than a broken leg. 3 years recovering from it. I was in a house, a vacant house that a friend of mine owned, on a mattress, living off credit cards when this happened. This is not good. My girlfriend left me and my dog got run over. And don't worry, he went on to write a big country hit. He's a big star now. Not a good time for me. But my parents had instilled in me this sense of excitement and humor and adventure, and so I took it to heart. I had myself surrounded with cartoon and joke books to keep my spirits up. I was watching Candid Camera on television. I remember this vividly. And I'm doodling. I doodled a little devil sticking his tongue out at you, which is now my federally registered trademark for the company I own, Prankmasters. This is the biggest representation of it I can show you right now without projecting it. That's my service mark. I'm watching Candid Camera, I think, well, I could open a practical joke business. I came down to Washington, I opened the business up, and I starved to death for 6 months. Then I got a call from a little company called the Washington Times. Did a feature article on me. I started getting a little bit of business coming in. Started getting a few phone calls. One of those phone calls came from another little old company called the Washington Post. I started getting a lot of phone calls. They ended up doing 4 feature articles on me. And one of those phone calls that I got came from a little old company that sent me some gold bullion in the mail, Associated Press. 1990, did a feature article on me, went to 15,000 radio and TV stations around the world. That's when I started doing the Australian Broadcast Network, the Canadian Broadcast Network, the Tokyo Today show. All of these things. Now, I'm not telling you this to blow my own horn. I'm telling you this because at the lowest point of my life, laying on that mattress, living off credit cards, totally alone, is when I got the idea to put me in this business, that put me in my speaking career, that put me where I am today. Because I kept this humor and excitement around me that allowed me to stay flexible and creative in the face of adversity, to think up that idea when I was at the lowest point of my life. Now, the reason I tell you this is because when you stand in front of a group, I don't care if it's a business meeting, I don't care if it's an inspirational meeting, I don't care if it's in church, I don't care where it is, people are looking to you for ideas. They're looking to you for ways to overcome and stay creative and flexible in the face of their adversities. And two of the biggest things that you can do when you stand up here is to wake them up, get through to them, move them to action, and let them laugh a little bit, make them laugh. Thanks so much. It's been a great day. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Wait a minute. We had a great day, didn't we? By using the Wake 'em Up system, you will be well on your way to your goal of great speaking. My closing thought to you is don't forget to wake 'em up.